All right, we're back. We're going to take the next step, and the next step is to take some steps, I think. We're trying to get Zool to move, and so the question is, how do we get it to do that? We're trying to get him to walk. So what I've done is I've kind of done the changes ahead of time, so I'm just going to review what I've changed, and then you can make those same changes in your own code. I think where we left it last time, we were in Object Zool, and we had just finished drawing Zool. So the drawings it's all going to be controlled by Object Zool. And if you look here in the draw state, you'll see that we kind of did in code what we need to do. We basically figure out which way we're facing. If we're facing to the right, and we're in the standing state, then we draw our sprite going to the right. For now, I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to have to talk about this a little bit later. I want to show you what the problem is. This is basically a fix that I put in. But our code, the way we left it last time, was like this, trying to get Zool to walk. But we ran into some issues. I'm going to go over those, what some of the issues are and ways around it. So let's see. Drawing is where we left it off, and then the next thing we need to do is we want to go into Object Zool land, and in here we have some things to do. First of all, in the create event, we've got to set some variables, and first thing we do in the create event is we set the state to z-state stand. This is I call it the Zool state, or the z state. And it tells you what basically what state Zool is in while he's in this object. And this is in the standing state. Where the object's called Object Zool land. There's basically two states that it can be in. I think it's standing and walking. So we're going to take care of those two today. The other things you have to do is set gravity to 0, because we'll be hopefully standing on the ground. We'll set the gravity directions to 270, just to be consistent. And then just so that he slows down when you let go of the arrow keys, we set the friction to 1. That will slowly slow Zool down to a skid or a stop. And then we also want to make sure that our vertical speed, we do an assigned variable. This is set friction, but assigned variable, set v speed to 0. That will just make sure that Zool is not going to be falling or moving vertically when he's in this land state. Now I was a little confused here. When I first looked at Object Zool land, I saw that it already had a create event. And I go, well, I didn't remember putting that in there. And what it shows you, if you look here, like this one's grayed out and this one's dark. The ones that are grayed out are actually being inherited from the parent. So it actually shows you what's going on in the parent right here in the child, and that's kind of new to GameMaker. I've never seen that before. So like say the draw event, if we go and take a look at it, there's all our code from Object Zool, and say, well, what's it doing here in Object Zool land? It's because it's being inherited into this code. See, it says preview read only. You can't change it here, but you can at least see what's going on in the parent for this same event. So back to create. Just make sure you have it set up and make it, add a create event to Object Zool land and then put these things in it. Those are important changes to make. The next thing we want to do is we want to add a keyboard left or key down left event. This is new, and I found a way to. You can actually, if you're doing just a bunch of variable assignments, you can just do them in one block. You just click this little plus thing, and it adds another variable thing to the bottom here. So that's what I'm doing here. Instead of having a separate block for each one like I had on the previous event, you can actually group them together if you're just all you're doing is setting a bunch of variables. So So here's the variables I'd like you to set. If we're moving to the left, we're going to set an H speed to -2.5, and make sure you say relative there, because we want the speed to increase as you're holding down the left arrow. Since we are going to be walking now, we want to change the state of Zool from standing to walking, so we do that next. And then since we hit the left arrow, we could be facing right, so we want to make sure we face to the left so that when we get to the draw event in the object Zool, it shows Zool walking to the left instead of to the right. So that's key down left. Key down right, same thing, it's just going the other direction. You set the H speed positive now because X goes positive to the right. You say relative. And then set the state to Z state while it doesn't change. It's set facing to face right. That'll get you moving left and right, which is cool. You finally get to move. Now, next thing we had to do was something kind of strange, or I needed to do something kind of strange, and that's here. We're going to add a begin step event. And the way you do that, you say add event, step, and then say begin step. This happens before the step event. It's like a preliminary to the step event, and what we're being asked to do is to set the state to Z state stand. Okay, which seems kind of odd. If you're in the walking state, why would you want to, in the begin step event, set it to stand? But the reason we're doing that is because later on we figure out which state we really are supposed to be in. I think that's in the step event, or maybe when we're doing our key down and stuff. But the default, it's kind of just setting the default state to those things. Okay. So here, add a begin step event, set the state to Z state stand. That gives us a default state. Another thing we have to add in order to be able to walk is a collision event with object solid. Remember, we're not using the solid checkbox that's available on objects. We're actually creating our own parent class object solid for everything that's solid in the game. So if we collide with something solid, we need to do a few things. First of all, we need to set our x coordinate to its previous location and our y coordinate to its previous location. So that's what we're doing here, this assigned variable. That's the symbol for it if you're looking for it on the drag and drop menu. You can also do this in the code too, but I did it here with drag and drop. And then one thing that's kind of missing, it used to be in the old version of GameMaker they had a drag and drop thing for move to contact. But in the new version, it looks like the only way to call that type of function is to call it programmatically. So we have to actually go do an execute code. That's what that looks like, that symbol. And say move contact all. Set the first parameter to direction. This is the direction you're moving. And set the second parameter to -1. That means you want to move to contact until it could be anywhere. You know there's something there because you crashed into it, so you move back a step and then slowly move 1 pixel at a time until you make contact with that object. And then since you hit something, you want to set your horizontal speed to 0. So just add that code to your collision with object solid, and that'll stop Zool from walking into walls and falling through floors and things. I think it's horizontally, so I think it's walking into walls or anything that's really solid. So that's all our changes to Object Zool Land. Now we want to take a look at our next object that we want to make changes to. Let's see. Now, in order to get Zool to walk around, what we want to do is kind of control the speed. We don't want Zool to just be able to walk faster and faster and faster until he blows through everything. We want to set some sort of speed limit, not only for moving horizontally, but also falling vertically. And so we need to create a few more constants. And the way we do that in the new game makers, we use these things called macros. So if we go to our scripts here, define constants, remember we made that script. We're going to add a couple of new constants. Here, we can see the ones we're using so far as Z-state stand and Z-state walk. I'd like to add these two macros to the bottom. So macro max speed, max H speed, that's the max horizontal speed. We'll set that to 14. And then also set max fall speed to 14 as well. So we're going to limit our speed of falling and moving horizontally to 14. We need these two constants in the next part of the code we're going to change. So if you could add this to your define constant script, that would be good. Next we go back to object Zool, and we're going to add a step event to object Zool. And this is a little bit strange, so let me bring this over so we can see it. Basically two variables assigning. First we're going to try to control the vertical speed, and we're going to use our constant or our macro max fall speed. And we're saying set the vertical speed to whatever the minimum value is between our max fall speed, which is 14, and whatever the vertical speed is now. Whichever one is the smallest, that's the one we want to set v speed to. That's what the min function does. So what this essentially does is just limits the falling speed to 14. If it's ever higher than that, it moves it back to 14. So you can never go faster than 14 pixels per frame. H speed's a little bit different because we can move left and right. Here we're just concerned about falling, but here we're concerned about going two different directions. So the way you do that is you set H speed equal to the median, which is a function, of negative max H speed, then a comma. The second parameter is H speed, the current H speed, and then the third parameter is the max H speed, not negated. And so this is kind of gives you a range between negative 14 and 14. We never want to go past 14 or want to go less or faster than negative 14. So that's what that one does. So that's kind of our speed limiter on our movement of Zool. We do this on Zool, and it will affect the max speed for all the objects that are children of Zool, and that's what we're trying to avoid, having to type this in 5 or 6 times. We can just do it once here in object Zool. So now let's give it a try. I think I hit everything. Let me just double check. Yeah, I can't think of anything else that I did, so I'm going to run it, and we'll take a look. Here's our game. Zool is hanging in midair, but we should be able to make him move around. And you can see he's moving really quick. He's also not animating. Okay, he just first frame, and that's just too fast. Okay. So we have a couple problems to fix. First thing I would do is in our room. Let me stop the game here. I noticed that in our room they have this thing called creation code. And so what we could do is we could put some code in here, and there's a variable called, we'll do an execute code. And we can set room speed. Instead of 60, which is normal for GameMaker 2, we're going to set it to 30. And let's see what that does to the speed of Zool. Right now it seems like he's moving twice too fast. So if we if we slow down the room speed, the animation rate of the room, maybe we can get Zool to not move so fast. Yeah, so that's what I'm normally used to. He slowly speeds up, slowly slides to a stop. But he's not animating, which is troubling because this should work at this point. And I spent some time on this. trying to figure out why that doesn't work. And I haven't been able to pinpoint a reason, because what we're doing, or what I'm doing, is correct from what I understand. So I have to put in this kind of thing when you have to work around a problem with the platform. It's called a kludge. You're trying to get it to work. So if you look in here, if you remember in my draw code, I had to put in some extra code to make this work. So the animation doesn't quite work. When we actually facing right and we're in the walking state, it should draw the sprite, but it should animate. The value you're supposed to put here is -1 for draw sprite, and that says don't restart or don't change the image index. Just let the animation continue one after another. But what I'm finding is that that just doesn't work. If you pass in a -1 here for this, let me do that now. And a -1 here, like the function description tells you, if you do it like that, it's not supposed to restart it image index 0 every time. And what I'm finding is that, sure enough, it's not animating. It's just showing the first image in the set of animations, or set of frames for the animation, and it just doesn't work. So my workaround then was to manage the image index myself. I'm still not convinced this is working correctly, but at least it animates. And so what I do is I add 1 to the image index, although I suppose that's being done automatically. So yeah, so I'm going to do a little experiment here, at least to the right. I'm going to get rid of these parentheses, and I'm just going to mod it. So I just take the image index and I'll divide it by the number of sprites. So this sprite get number gets the number of sprites that are in this, a number of frames that are in this sprite, and it divides it into the image index and then tells you the remainder. So we're trying to get this to loop around. Let's see if that changes our behavior. So this is an experiment, may not work, but give it a try anyway. No, it didn't work. Okay, so what we're left with then is to manage this ourselves. So I'll put it back the way I had it. I'll say image index +1. So I'm adding 1 to the image index, and then I'm setting this to the image index. Okay, and I'll do the same down here. Basically, I'm just adding 1 to the image index, and then I'm modding by the number of frames so that we stay within. I think there's 16 of them, so we'll stay between 0 and 15. And then again here, I'll say image index. And now when I run the game, my hope is that the sprite will finally animate. So he looks like he's walking now. Okay. Animation seems a little slow given the speed that we're walking, but we'll sort that out later. But at least we have an animating sprite. He's still just hanging in the air. We haven't. If you look at Object Zool, the first thing Object Zool does after it's created is it changes himself in an Object Zool land. So it doesn't even look if it's on the land. It just changes to Object Zool land. So that's how it kind of looks like we're just walking on air. But that's okay. For now, we're just trying to get him to animate. So now we have animating Zool. He can go in either direction. He crashes into things and doesn't plow through them. There's a speed limit on how fast he can walk left or right. We'll work on falling through the air next. But I think that's enough for this video. All right, thanks.